Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Sip and Talk. It's time for another deep dive, and you guys already know we love to go deep.
Deep dives and deep drinks, am I right?
You know it. Box office domination today.
Domination is right. We're talking about Neza too, folks.
Oh, yeah.
The highest grossing film in China.
Like ever.
Ever. It even beat out Chang'an Lake, and that was a total monster hit, you know?
That was huge.
Huge.
Yeah.
So we're going deep into this world of Chinese animation,
Really?
but it's, you know, it gets a little deeper than just kid stuff.
It's fascinating. You know how these stories, like ancient Chinese mythology, can become this global phenomenon?
Right.
Yeah.
We're talking box office records. We're talking about intricate symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
And get this. Some people are even saying there are hidden political messages.
Oh.
Like maybe even some anti-American stuff.
Ah. Yeah, that online chatter.
Yeah.
About the symbolism. It's always a rabbit hole, isn't it?
Always.
Worth exploring.
Yeah.
You know, because symbols, they can be so powerful.
Right.
Because their meaning shifts depending on who's interpreting them.
For sure.
Okay, let's back up for a sec.
Okay.
So we've got two films here,
Right.
both based on this classic Chinese novel, Feng Xinyanyi.
Right.
But they're set thousands of years apart.
Okay.
So Neza 1 came out in 2019, and then this year we got the sequel, Neza 2.
And Neza 2 picks up where that one left off.
Okay.
Neza and his frenemy.
Yeah.
Wu Bing.
Yeah.
They've survived this crazy heavenly tribulation,
Oh, yeah.
but their bodies are toast.
Yeah, that whole soul-swapping thing was wild.
Oh, I know.
They have to use this magical lotus to rebuild their bodies.
Yes.
But something goes wrong,
Uh-oh.
and Io Bing's soul ends up stuck in Neza's body for 7 days.
Talk about awkward.
Talk about an awkward situation,
It
right?
reminds me of those body swap comedies,
Right.
but with a mythical twist.
Oh, yeah.
Makes you think about identity, doesn't it?
It does.
What makes us us?
Yeah.
You know? Is it the body or the soul?
Yeah, totally. And all this is happening while Io Bing's dad, the Dragon King,
Right.
is out for revenge.
Of course.
He thinks his son is dead,
Mm-hmm.
and he's ready to unleash his fury on Neza's hometown.
And you can't underestimate that symbolism of the Dragon King
No.
in Chinese culture.
Right.
He represents power,
Mm.
authority,
Yeah.
often even the forces of nature themselves.
Oh.
So it's this clash of cosmic proportions.
Yeah.
That's huge,
Yeah.
not just a personal vendetta.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And then we have this mysterious villain,
Okay.
Liang Shannon,
Mm-hmm.
brewing immortality pills in this giant cauldron.
Right.
And here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
The cauldron is covered in this texture that looks a lot like dollar signs.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's one of the details that's fueling the whole anti-American interpretation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, some people are saying it's a subtle jab at American capitalism.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hold on, there's more, right?
Yeah.
What about that whole thing with the Jade Palace
Yes.
and the green card?
Yes. So the Jade Palace is where the gods reside.
Right.
It's often described as very white in the film,
Okay.
and some people are drawing a connection to the White House.
And
And the green card that Neza needs to enter the Jade Palace.
yeah.
Apparently, the design is similar to the American bald eagle.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty specific.
Uh-huh.
So is Neza 2 intentionally sending these anti-American messages,
Right.
or are people just seeing what they want to see?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
I guess so.
Like, we can analyze the symbols,
Right.
but we can't get inside the filmmakers' heads.
Right.
What's interesting is that these interpretations exist at all.
Right.
It tells us something about the current cultural climate, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the anxieties that are floating around.
For sure.
Yeah.
Speaking of anxieties,
Okay.
this whole discussion reminds me of another wave of Chinese films that have been making waves.
All right.
The Wolf Warrior franchise.
Yeah.
Those movies are like patriotic on steroids.
They are definitely a cultural phenomenon in China.
For those who haven't seen them, Wolf Warrior 1 is about this elite soldier, Ling Feng,
Okay.
who takes on a group of mercenaries led by, wait for it,
Okay.
a former U.S. Navy SEAL.
Wow. Okay.
And in the sequel,
Yes.
he's in a war-torn African country,
Uh-huh.
rescuing Chinese citizens
Okay.
and fighting off, you guessed it, more mercenaries.
Wow.
Yeah.
More mercenaries.
Yeah.
So these films were box office smashes in mainland China,
Huge.
breaking records left and right.
Wow.
But the response from overseas Chinese audiences has
Yeah.
been, let's just say, more mixed.
Yeah, some overseas Chinese viewers felt like the films didn't represent their experiences at all.
Right.
And that over-the-top nationalism could even lead to more prejudice.
Yeah.
Or misunderstandings about them in their adopted countries.
It highlights this tension that exists for many diaspora communities. You know, how do you navigate your cultural heritage and your national identity in a globalized world?
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It's a tough question.
So we have these two types of films.
Okay.
Neza 2 and Wolf Warrior.
Right.
Both dealing with Chinese identity and nationalism.
Yes.
But in totally different ways.
Wolf Warrior is very overt in its messaging.
Yeah.
China is strong. China is powerful. China will protect its own.
Okay.
Neza 2 is more subtle,
Right.
working with mythology and symbolism to explore those ideas of identity and belonging.
But they're both striking a chord with audiences.
They are.
Which makes me wonder, what are people responding to? What's going on beneath the surface here?
I think one thing they're responding to is this desire for China to be recognized and respected on the world stage.
Okay.
China has achieved so much in recent decades.
Right.
And there's a feeling that the world hasn't fully acknowledged that.
So it's like, hey, world, look at us.
Exactly.
We've arrived.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's that undercurrent of anxiety, right? Like,
Yes.
are we being accepted?
Right.
Are we being understood?
Yeah.
Or are we being threatened?
It's a complicated mix
It is.
of pride and insecurity, ambition and vulnerability.
Right.
And those emotions are reflected in the stories being told, both through the overt heroism of Wolf Warrior and the more nuanced symbolism of Neza 2.
And maybe that's where those potential anti-American symbols in Neza 2 come in.
Okay.
You know, they could be a way of expressing those anxieties, even if it's not intentional.
It's all very nuanced.
It is.
It's not just about entertainment.
Right.
It's about processing complex emotions related to national identity, cultural heritage, and China's place in the world.
So where do we go from here?
Yeah.
We've got this smash hit film, Neza 2.
Right.
It's breaking records, it's sparking debates, and maybe even revealing some anxieties. Yeah. About China's role on the world stage. Where does this leave us?
Well, that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating.
Right.
We're not just analyzing a film.
Right.
We're using it as a lens to understand China's cultural and political landscape at this particular moment in time.
For sure.
And as we'll see, it's a landscape full of contradictions, complexities, and a whole lot of questions.
For sure.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting is how Neza 2 has become like more than just a film, you know?
Right.
It's a cultural touchstone.
It really is.
It's a way for people to kind of grapple with these larger issues within Chinese society.
It was wild, right?
Yeah.
Who knows a story about a mythical trickster god
Right.
could spark such an intense debate?
It's the power of storytelling.
Yeah.
You know? When you tap into these universe themes of identity, rebellion, fate, people connect on a visceral level.
Speaking of rebellion.
Yes.
Some critics are saying the film glorifies disobedience.
Especially towards authority figures like the god of longevity.
Interesting.
Isn't that a bit risky in a society that values respect for elders and tradition?
It is interesting how the film handles that tension.
Yeah.
On one hand, you have this emphasis on fulfilling your duty, accepting your fate. But then you have Neza shouting, "My fate is my own."
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
It's definitely pushing some boundaries.
So is it a call for blind obedience or for individual empowerment? Getting mixed signals here.
That's where things get nuanced, I think.
Yeah.
It's not a simple black and white message.
Right.
It's more about finding that balance between personal freedom and societal harmony.
Oh, okay.
Which, by the way, is a balance that's been debated in China for centuries.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So it's reflecting like a deeper cultural dilemma.
Precisely.
Not just about some kid with fire powers.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so resonant.
Yeah.
Especially for younger generations who might be questioning tradition and wanting to forge their own paths. But for older, more conservative viewers, that message might feel a bit threatening.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
Change is always unsettling for some, right?
I guess so.
It disrupts the established order, and that's a valid concern.
Yeah.
How do you encourage individuality without sacrificing those values that hold a society together?
Right.
You know, it's a question every generation grapples with in China and beyond.
So we're back to this idea of Neza 2 holding up a mirror to Chinese society.
Yes.
Making people think about these big questions.
Right.
About identity, tradition, the individual versus the collective.
It's all there.
And all of this through animation.
I know.
Pretty sneaky.
It's brilliant, actually.
Yeah.
It allows them to explore these potentially sensitive topics in a way that's engaging and accessible with a wide audience.
Yeah.
You know, not just academics or politicians debating in some ivory tower.
Right. It's like, hey, kids, enjoy this action-packed movie with magic and mythical creatures. Oh, and also, let's ponder the complexities of individual expression versus societal harmony.
Subtle but effective.
It is. It really is.
Yeah.
It's kind of similar to what we were talking about with Wolf Warrior.
Yes.
But with a totally different approach.
A very different approach.
Yeah.
So Wolf Warrior is very direct.
Yes.
In its portrayal of Chinese strength and patriotism. It's meant to evoke a visceral reaction.
Right.
A surge of national pride.
Mm-hmm.
Neza 2 is working on a more symbolic level.
Okay.
Leaving more room for interpretation.
Right.
It's asking questions rather than giving answers.
Okay, so both are tapping into this wave of emotion.
Yes.
This hunger for something.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is driving that from a cultural perspective?
Well, I think, as we were saying earlier,
Yeah.
there's this desire for recognition,
Okay.
for respect on the global stage.
Okay.
China has gone through incredible transformations in recent decades,
Mm-hmm.
but there's still a feeling that the world hasn't fully caught up.
So it's like, hey, world, look at us.
Yeah.
We've arrived.
Right. And we're not done yet. There's still so much to unpack.
There is.
We need to look at the criticisms leveled at Neza 2,
Okay.
the potential impact on the future of Chinese animation.
Right. There's that whole debate about the film promoting blind obedience.
Right.
And demonizing traditional figures.
Right.
We touched on it earlier, but it's worth taking a closer look. All right. So before we wrap things up with Neza 2,
Okay.
we got to address like the elephant in the room, right?
Mm-hmm.
That whole debate about the film,
Yes.
promoting blind obedience.
Right.
Some folks are saying it's actually demonizing
Right.
traditional figures like the god of longevity.
It's a tricky one. Yeah.
It is tricky, right?
On the surface,
Yeah.
Neza 2 seems to champion individuality, rebellion.
Right.
But then there are these underlying messages about accepting one's fate and fulfilling one's duty.
It's giving me whiplash. Like, is it a call to defy authority?
Right.
Or to submit to it?
I think it comes down to interpretation.
Okay.
I think it's less about blind obedience.
Okay.
And more about understanding your place within a larger system.
Okay.
It's about using your individual strengths to contribute to the greater good.
So more like a nuanced take on responsibility.
Exactly.
Rather than just blindly following orders.
Yes, and that's a conversation that's particularly relevant in China today.
Right.
You know, where there's this tension between maintaining social harmony and embracing individual aspirations.
Like the film is walking this tightrope.
It is.
Trying to appeal to both those who crave individual freedom
Right.
and those who value traditional values of duty and respect for authority.
And that's a challenge for any society
Yeah.
that's undergoing rapid change, isn't it?
Yeah.
How do you balance that need for stability with the desire for progress?
Right.
I don't think Neza 2 offers any easy answers,
Yeah.
but it definitely sparks the conversation.
Which is probably why it's causing such a stir.
Right.
Right. People are reading all sorts of things into it,
Exactly.
depending on their own perspectives and anxieties.
It's a cultural Rorschach test in a way.
It really is.
And that speaks volumes about the anxieties and aspirations swirling around in China right now.
Let's talk about the production itself for a minute.
Okay.
I read that Neza 2 involved like over 4,000 people
Wow.
and cost a whopping 600 million yuan to make.
That's insane.
That's insane, right?
Yeah.
That's a clear indication that the Chinese animation industry
Right.
is a force to be reckoned with.
It is.
They're not just churning out cheap knockoffs anymore.
They've upped their game.
Yeah, they're aiming for global quality and recognition,
Absolutely.
which makes those accusations of blind obedience even more interesting.
Yeah.
Right, because on one hand, you have this incredibly innovative and ambitious project
Right.
pushing the boundaries of animation.
Yeah.
But then you have this underlying message
Yeah.
that some interpret as promoting conformity.
It's a paradox, isn't it?
So where does all of this leave us?
Yeah.
We've got this box office behemoth,
Right.
Neza 2, sparking intense debates, showcasing incredible animation,
It is incredible.
and maybe even revealing some deep-seated anxieties within Chinese society.
It's been a fascinating journey, hasn't it?
It has.
And I think the key takeaway is this. Don't underestimate the power of popular culture.
Yeah.
Films like Neza 2 can be so much more than just entertainment.
Right.
They can be windows into the soul of a nation.
Wow, it's deep.
Reflecting its hopes, its fears, and its struggles.
And that's what makes these deep dives so rewarding.
They are.
We're not just watching movies.
Right.
We're using them as lenses to understand the world around us.
Exactly. And in this case, that world is complex, contradictory.
It is.
And constantly evolving.
Yeah, it is.
But it's a world worth exploring,
Yeah.
questioning, and engaging with.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride.
It's been fun.
Through the world of Neza 2. It's been an eye-opener for sure.
And remember, folks, this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
There are so many more stories out there waiting to be unpacked and understood.
Oh, sure.
So keep watching, keep thinking, and keep those conversations going.
And that's a wrap on the deep dive. Until next time, stay curious. I just want to give another shout out to Micky from Mickytolife. His channel is a treasure trove of inspiration, and he's a huge Sip&Talk fan.
Absolutely. Make sure to check him out and maybe even share your awesome podcast intro with him once you've created it.